My dear serial progress seekers, wouldn't it be cool if you could learn a skill that within a few weeks would transform your life forever? If you could just get it down and you could make it a part of your life. Well, there is. I've discovered it, and it's one of my secret weapons. The only problem is you're going to absolutely hate it. All right, so I'm going to teach you this skill that is super important to anybody that wants to make a huge impact in the world, that wants to be successful, that wants to have more freedom in their life. I'm going to teach it to you on this podcast. But keep in mind, I did tell you before we got started and before you spent the time learning this skill with me that you were going to hate it. All right, I think that's enough. Enough preamble, enough preview. Okay, let's dive in. Let's do it. All right, so for this particular edition of the Serial Progress Speaker podcast, we're going to talk about the most boring skill in the world and how it actually turns you into a superhuman. So I'm super excited about this one because this is one of those things that is just like right under your nose, and it's hard to develop. But once you develop it, every other part of your life gets better. You get more confident. You get better at the things you're already trying to do. So like, let's say you're trying to learn an instrument. It makes you better at that. Let's say you're trying to build a business. It makes you better at that. Anything that you're trying to do, if you learn this skill, it sets you up to be that much better at anything else that you're actually trying to do. And so that's what we're going to get into today. And to set this up, before we get into what the actual skill is, I have to tell you, the majority of the human race gets sidetracked, gets distracted, gets hit with problems of their own making, whether it's a health thing, whether it's a being distracted thing, whether it's having people in your life that keep you distracted, all kinds of things. But most of these problems are of our own making. And that's a big thing. Another piece of that puzzle is the majority of the human race gets held back by never acting because of a lack of confidence. And it's really those things that are, sort of the bane of our existence as human beings, is that we get sidetracked by problems that we create. Maybe we don't realize we created them, but we create them. And we get realized by, we get sidetracked by a lack of confidence. And so today is going to actually help with that. So I'm going to teach you the skill. I'm not going to make you wait any longer. I'm going to talk about this skill. And I told you that you were going to hate this. My hope is that you don't stop listening to the podcast after I reveal what it is and you actually hear me out and you listen all the way through. This is going to be a short one, but it's going to be one of those short podcasts that you learn something that you're like, oh, I never really thought of it maybe that way before. And maybe I need to pay a little more attention to this part of my life because of what I'm going to say after this. So let's talk about what this skill is. The vast majority of the human race thinks that success means going all in on a particular skill, such as learning to play an instrument, learning to play a sport, learning how to be better at what you're doing at work, learning how to grow a business, learning marketing, learning all of these things, and getting like obsessed over these things that are supposedly the big skills. Like these are the big things, right? And yes, those things are all super important. I talk about marketing the majority of the time, so I can't knock those things. But the most important skill that you can develop as a human being is maintenance. Now, this is where everybody tunes out because they're like, oh, really? What are we talking about? But hear me out here. Maintenance is the most boring skill on the planet, but maintenance is also the most important skill on the planet. Now, what I mean by this is for most people, they get extremely bored, especially if you're like me and you have you tend to lend your mind and your brain tends to kind of go more of the creative path. My folks out here listening that are more of your organized and step-by-step everyday path, this is something you're actually probably a lot better at. But if you're like me and your brain tends to like live in the creative, then this is something that's difficult for you. So please listen. If you are someone that is always coming up with new ideas, always come up with new businesses, always coming up with new ways to do things, if you are a creative, this is going to be especially important. But even if you are someone that is already a little more on the organized path, hear me out. So the most boring skill out there, but the most valuable skill that you can have is the skill of maintenance. Now, what I mean by that is the stupid stuff, like brushing your teeth when you're supposed to brush your teeth, like, in the morning, in the night, but after every meal. These are things a lot of us skip, right? Especially as creative types, because we get so in depth with the things that we're creating that we forget to do these basic things. And the key here is showering before work, even if you're working from home, making your bed, things like that. These are like the things that those of us who are so excited to get out there and be creative, so excited to get to work and do things or to build something, sometimes we leave these things behind. And this is a giant mistake, okay? Those of us that are creative types, we tend to get bored with maintenance tasks. We tend to just slack on maintenance tasks because we think our brains are wired a certain way, and any time we can spend being creative, that's what's going to get us to our goal, okay? Now, this is a fool's errand if you don't have some of this basic stuff in place. So I want to get into this. I want to get into the secret behind daily routines and how simple maintenance creates a foundation that makes all of the high-level thinking, the creative thinking that we do, better. Okay, so let me dig into this. And like I said, just hear me out on this. Brushing your teeth. Let's talk about this. Brushing your teeth in the morning after every meal before you go to bed. Doing that. That's so boring, right? But we need to do it. We know we need to do it. Even if, dental health isn't your thing, and I hope it is, because dental health is not only important to your, teeth, it's important to your heart because, you can dig into the science behind that. But making your bed when you get up, this is something a lot of us creatives hate to do because it seems like a waste of our time, but it's important. I'll get into how in just a minute. Taking a shower before work. Okay, this is important. Washing your face before you go to bed at night, important. Cleaning your workspace at the end of the day. All of these things are what we would consider extremely boring maintenance task. The reason is because it's hard to see an immediate benefit to a lot of these things. Not that brushing your teeth and washing your face and taking a shower doesn't provide a pretty awesome benefit, but the idea is it's not like a whiz bang, holy crap sort of moment in our brains. And for those of us that tend to lean more towards the creative side of things, that's what we're used to. That's where we get most of our fuel to keep going. That's what being alive is creating something out of thin air. And maintenance tasks don't fit into this. Now, I want to stress how important these maintenance tasks are, and I want to appeal to you, and I really want to put this forward. The most important creative moments in my life came out because not, I was just being creative and I was going and putting in 14-hour days and just hardcore doing it and building. It was when I was able to establish a maintenance schedule. And I'll go into that in a minute. But it was when I was able to establish a maintenance schedule of things that I did in a pattern every day where my creativity was actually unlocked the most. Because what you'll find as a creative is when you are locked into being in front of a computer, being on the basketball court, being at an instrument, there comes a point where your brain absolutely shuts off because it can no longer function in creative mode. Maintenance tasks actually do a great job of breaking up those moments so that you can be in a much more creative place more often. So you can actually spend less time actually doing the work of things that you want to do to be more creative. And if you break it up right, your brain actually consumes this stuff better and you get better at it faster. Your brain builds a muscle memory for it faster. Now, let's keep going with this. What I mean by this is all of these very simple maintenance tasks that if you're creative, you may not be as good at, you don't want to be good at because it seems boring. You're like, God, Atkins, really? they're really good because these very simple maintenance habits help you develop the habit of getting into new habits. Many of us are very, very bad at sticking to something. And while we can create some really cool things in a short amount of time because we are creative types, it's very, very hard for us to stick to something long enough to get really good at it and to get to the good stuff. The best things that anybody has ever built, it's because they were able to continually focus on something. So an example is this. I always look at some of the best basketball players in the world. And, you can look at a Kobe, you can look at a Steph Curry, you can look at these kinds of things, and you can start to understand that they were just born with a level of talent that most of us don't have for that particular sport. But the thing that if you really dig into personalities like that, not only did they have the talent, not only were they, hyper creative in that space with that, sport, but they also put in the habits. They also put in the time to build those habits, and they had the daily routines, meaning nobody outworked Kobe or Steph in the position of practice. and they got really good at it, and they developed those really good habits. What I mean by this is a lot of us, as we're sort of building out our big stuff, we've not trained our brains to have a stick-to-itness long enough, meaning we're always jumping to the next thing. We're always looking at the next big thing, the next new thing, and that's where our brain starts to turn into this thing that's always looking for that jolt of the next new thing, even if it's sort of related to the same thing. And this is a big problem in the marketing world, and why I've been extremely successful in the marketing world, but a lot of people haven't, is, I do a lot of boring things over and over and over again. For instance, the business that I have that does millions of dollars a year in the marketing space, one of the habits that I developed was sending an email almost every day. So literally for the last 10 years, I've sent an email almost every day. It's a simple habit, but it's something that I developed. And that is built on top of a foundation of getting good at maintenance tasks. And the thing is if you can get those maintenance tasks down and you can do those maintenance things every day, those super boring, brush your teeth, make your bed, those types of things, it starts to rearrange the way that your brain works so that starts to translate over into everything else that you do. So these very boring, these simple habits, these skills that you're sort of putting together that don't seem like skills, but doing them every day, these help you to develop the habit of getting into new habits. And also, just as an aside, these very basic maintenance habits, these skills that you put together that don't seem like skills at all, they make you more confident because you've tied up loose ends in your brain. Like, yeah, listen, if you go out and you haven't brushed your teeth, somewhere in the back of your mind, you're like, how's my breath bad? If you don't take a shower before work, even if you're working from home, you're like, oh, I can't go out because I haven't showered. Like maybe I smell. Don't laugh, but you get the idea. The ball game is this. It's when you can get these things down, you're more confident, but more importantly, you are developing patterns that are going to help you in the long run. Now, let me get to the actual point of what I'm getting to here. Most of the human race is actually terrible at creating new habits because they haven't gotten good at the basics. Now, whether this is something you didn't do as a child, the good news is that even if you don't have some of these basics down, and I know this is crazy. I know many of us learn to brush our teeth. Many of us learn to take a shower in the morning or night. Many of us learn these things. You may think I'm being silly, but what I want you to do is I want you to think about what are the extra things that I could do that would drastically improve my life if I did them every day. And so just taking a step back, one of the things that I developed over the last few years is I always washed my face before I went to bed at night. I always did that. But I started to take some special care with it, meaning I got some fancy facial soap. This is not fun things to admit as a guy, right? Because guys, we don't do this stuff, but guys, you should do this stuff. I started to make it a whole thing. I got this little tool that would vibrate and sort of, massage my skin with the soap. And it was this whole routine that I learned. And I just got on YouTube and I pulled this off. And I actually, it was a video from Pharrell, and he went through his face wash routine. So I actually found some guys out there that were doing some cool stuff and I thought they had good skin. And I was like, okay, cool. Like that's awesome. I'm going to do that. And going from my throw water on my face and dry my face off routine to something that actually took some time, where I would do this a few times a week and do something special, it helped me to develop more of a habit. My skin, believe it or not, really quickly got even better than it was with just the standard, nightly guy throw water on your face routine. My skin got better. And on top of that, what I started to notice is that I started to get better at some higher return habits. So what I would say is these daily maintenance tasks are what we would call low return habits, because you don't really see a lot. You may see some stuff, but it takes some time. But the high return habits started to get better. And what I mean by that, these are the habits that turn into monsters. And what I mean by that is, like, for instance, like a high return habit would be something like this: creating podcasts 3 times a week. That's not easy. That's not easy at all. Anybody that does what I, am doing right now, it's not easy. If you don't have good habits in place, it's not easy at all. And those of you that have watched me try to put together a podcast where I'm doing lots of, episodes and getting good content out, and you've seen me start and stop many times, you know that, because I'm not superhuman at all. It's something that I have started and stopped many times. If I had kept my podcast going from way back when I started, I would be so much further towards the goal that I want to achieve with my podcast, this podcast that I do for you guys. So creating a podcast 3 times a week, that got easier for me when I started to establish better maintenance habits. Okay. And like I said, I'm always looking for new ways that I can now get my maintenance habits down. What's something that I could add onto my routine? Maybe it adds a little bit of time, but man, does it make me feel better. And man, does it start to really get my brain into a mode where I'm not thinking about work. I'm thinking about the maintenance habit. And that's really the thing, is removing your brain from this thing that it's constantly involved in with the high return habits, taking it out and putting it into just a simple maintenance habit, which we would call a low return habit. And it checks your brain out of the main thing for a minute, so that when your brain does check back into this thing that we're always focused on, your brain actually has the ability to attack it from a fresh angle, which is the key. So creating a podcast 3 times a week, sending out emails to generate new business, monitoring your expenses better every month. That's a high return skill, whether you know it or not. Many people I know, they kind of manage what is in their account, but they're not constantly looking at, hey, where's my money going? And how do I make sure that we're decreasing this every month? I have somebody on my team right now that's like their core thing. And the amount of money they have saved us in our business just this last year, shout out to Alicia, it's amazing, but it's something that we do every single week. We're like, okay, what's the new stuff we signed up for? Do we still need that? Let's get rid of it. We do it every week. We do it every single week, every single month. And the amount of money that we have effectively made by not spending certain amounts of money every month is staggering. It would blow you away how much that impacts my business. But my point to you here is none of those high return, quick return things that are habits for us now, that are skills for us now, none of those things would be possible without really having a good maintenance schedule down. And that's what I really want to get across to you guys. It is the most boring thing I can possibly talk about, especially to my folks that are creative types. We just want to create all the time. I'm with you. I'm such that person. We don't want to focus on actually taking care of ourselves, taking care of our workspaces, making sure that everything's good. But if we don't, it actually starts to really inhibit our ability to be creative in an effective way. You still get some of the juice in your head from creating certain things, but you'll start to notice that you're in a rut. So what's the moral of the story here? I want to wrap this up because I wanted this to be, fast. The moral of the story is this. If you right now are feeling as if you're not as effective at work, you're not as effective in your business, you're not as effective in your weight loss routine, you're not as effective in any of the things that you're trying to do right now that are going to get you a return and a high return quickly, I want you to take a step back and I want you to look at what's a way that I could get better at a maintenance task like brushing your teeth or washing your face or any of that boring stuff that you don't really want to do every day because it takes time and you want to get to the good stuff. Focus on improving or expanding that maintenance task, and you will see a high return in the creative task, which in turn is going to translate to more dollars in your pocket, more freedom in your life, and more enjoyment of the work that you're trying to do as a human being on this planet right now. So the point is, the most boring skill, which is maintenance, it's also the thing for those of you that really focus on mastering that skill, really focus on expanding that skill for yourselves, this thing that we don't want to think about, it will effectively train your brain to do some things that are absolutely superhuman. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you enjoyed it. Listen, if you enjoyed this podcast, do me a favor, subscribe to it on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me on Twitter. I am twitter.com/Ben Adkins, BenAdkins. Or you can always follow me at serialprogressseeker.com. That's where we put all the show notes. That's where we put all the good stuff that you've got from this show. You can always go back and listen there. You can find old episodes, and you can get a little more of an insight into, what I'm doing on a daily basis. So thanks for listening. I know this is an odd episode because of the subject matter, but this is one of those skills that if you really get it down and you really understand what I'm saying, that in 4 weeks from right now, the day that you're listening to this episode, 4 weeks from right now, if you can focus on expanding and improving your maintenance task in your life, you will see a drastic improving of the creative stuff, the work stuff, the stuff that makes you more money, that makes you feel better about yourself at the end of the day, that helps you lose weight, like all those cool things that we all want to see in our lives because it makes us healthier. It all starts with mastering maintenance task. All right. So I hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, in the next few weeks, I got a lot of really good stuff coming for you. Make sure you come back and listen. And do me a favor. If you're enjoying this, if you're enjoying any of the episodes, find the episode that you've enjoyed the most lately and share it with a few friends. Just turn them on to the Serial Progress Seeker podcast. Tell them what you think about it and share an episode with them that you think would benefit them in their life. And that's like the nicest thing that you can do for me, and hopefully a really nice thing that you can do for them too. All right. Take care of yourself. I'll see you on the next episode.